The MD and Head of Asia, Telecom and Media Research at UBS joins us now to give us the financial impact that this would have on most of the companies. Suresh, first your thoughts on how much this could impact the listed players like Idea, Bharti, etc.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I think I can barely hear the audio, so I think you guys had to make some adjustments. I think you're asking about the TRAI is 1 rupee per
yes.
Lost call or missed call. So I think it's going to be a bit tough to enforce this for a couple of reasons. I think first of all, in urban areas, like let's say the top 15 cities, during peak periods there is a genuinely a spectrum shortage, which I think is the government needs to address that. That is number one. The second thing is, for calls that are kind of, disconnected midway, especially if it involves two operators, it's always a little controversial whose network was what that, failed. So my sense is it's a good idea in theory, but I think it's going to be quite difficult to implement in practice. That is number one. The second thing is I don't think the mobile operators are going to take this very easily. I think they can probably voice their concerns to TRAI or potentially TDSAT. So I don't really think, while it's a good idea from the regulator to protect the consumer, I think given the spectrum constraints and given there are too many operators, I do believe it's going to be a little difficult to implement.
So at the moment, Suresh, you will not be changing your EPS or profit or revenue projections to account for this, to subtract any penalties?
Oh, no, certainly not. Certainly not. I don't think at this point we are clear how this is going to be implemented. We ran some simple numbers. I think, as I said, the spectrum constraint is primarily in the big cities, let's say the top 15 cities or 20 cities during peak period. So, from an impact perspective, it's not going to be very material, I think, even if it were to be implemented. But having said that, as I go back to the earlier thing, A, operators need not agree to this. B, I think there is potentially some practical difficulty for TRAI in terms of enforcing this.
Okay, but hypothetically, if this is enforced in its entirety, then what do you think the mobile operators will be able to do? Will telcos be able to raise tariffs to compensate for the financial loss, or will
could you repeat that question, because I'm not able to hear that very clearly?
Sure, I'm gonna try and speak up a little more. My question is, if this is enforced in its entirety, then will the telcos be able to raise tariffs, or do you think that given the competition has been heightened with the RelGeo launch, telcos will be unable to raise tariffs now?
Okay, so you're asking in terms of heightened competition, will they be able to raise capital? Am I correct?
Raise tariffs.
Cash or raise tariffs?
Tariffs, yes, tariffs. Yes, tariffs.
Tariffs, okay. So let's look at it 2-3 ways, right? Okay, clearly, RGO has been threatening to launch for the last 3 odd years. I think now finally they will end up launching maybe a soft launch in December and a real launch in March or something. But, let's look at 2-3 things, right? First of all, I think the voice business is like a cash cow. I don't think it requires a lot of investments, and I don't think the voice minutes are going to go down. So that'll continue to be a cash cow. Secondly, on data, I think we have seen some explosive growth, not in terms of just usage per subscriber, but also new users coming into the system. So as of now, I think the smartphone penetration in India stands at like kind of mid-teens. And my sense is we will get to a 60-70% kind of penetration over the next probably 5-6 years. And that definitely means there is a tremendous amount of growth that is going to come on both the data usage as well as on data revenues. Because even if you assume realizations were to fall, I don't know, let's say for argument's sake 10% every year, then I think even then we estimate that data revenues could go up 9 to 10x in the next 10 years. So that does provide a very, very big opportunity for the established players, which is Bharti, Vodafone, Idea. And I do think that you may not need to raise tariffs on data. In fact, you may want to cut tariffs judiciously because it will stimulate a lot of usage. Not only is that, but as more people come into the data world, the existing users will also tend to use their phones a lot more. And also this is even more pronounced given we don't have very good fixed broadband, especially outside the top 5-6 cities. The fixed broadband is really poor. So I think, the mobile data is a huge opportunity, which would mean that, operators just need to invest and reap the rewards as opposed to, thinking of raising tariffs.
Okay, finally, Suresh, therefore, what is your order of stock preference?
So we are quite positive on the mobile telecom operators, both Bharti Airtel and Idea. And we also like Infratel, but I think the bigger buy here is Bharti Airtel because we think there are 3 reasons you need to buy. First is the data boom we talked about. Second is the divestment. I do think that they will end up divesting Africa, part of Africa, later this year and potentially the whole of Africa over the next 12-18 months. And thirdly, I think deleveraging, which will happen as a result of partly divestment, partly the free cash flow generation, because as you may know, most of the spectrum is now kind of tied in, and Bharti has like 17% of the spectrum that has been allocated nationally. And with, potentially some spectrum trading, they could get that number higher. And I do believe Bharti Airtel currently looks very, very compelling from a risk-reward perspective.
Okay, so Bharti Airtel looks compelling from a risk-reward perspective. What kind of target price do you have on the stock, and how are you approaching Idea now?
See, I think we like both Bharti and Idea, no doubts about that. I think the only reason I like Bharti a little more is because the catalysts are more, I think, particularly the divestment as well as the spectrum bank, because I do believe in a data world, the quantity of spectrum you have directly correlates to a much superior customer experience. So therefore, Bharti seems to be quite well positioned. Idea is well positioned in their stronger circles. I mean, and Idea has been an execution machine. I mean, I think this is a company which has done an outstanding job in terms of improving their revenue market share. But, and there's this marginal preference for Bharti Airtel, though we like Idea as well.
All right, Suresh, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us with your analysis of this new penalty, which you say is not going to impact, or at least you're not factoring in anything in terms of a P&L loss just yet. But big preference for Bharti and Idea from UBS. We'll take a